All right, so yesterday I did the strange death of Canada, and today I wanted to do the strange death of Alberta. Now, Alberta is a little bit different of an, you know, example, I guess, or a place if you want to put it that way. But um, I said that the whole virus scenario was the tipping point for Canada. A better way of putting it, I think, would be the final nail in the coffin, and I think Canada's too far gone. There's no, again, Canada's going downhill. We're in the early to mid stages of a crash landing. We're going down one way or the other, whether it's a hard landing or a soft landing, we're going down. And by that I mean Canada. Um, as far as Alberta goes, I thought Alberta was still able to be saved up until recently. And what changed it was the fact that I think the only hope for Alberta was the UCP actually being at least somewhat conservative, which was debatable. I still think that they weren't very good even prior to the virus situation, but ever since they locked us down again, that was the tipping point for me. I think Alberta's finished. Like again, I hate to break it to people, but I think we're done. Um, the only hope we had left was staying open, right? And again, we weren't even open. We still had a ton of restrictions. We weren't Florida or Georgia or South Dakota or any of these places. We were a far cry from that. But I think that was the tipping point because, like I said, like unemployment is in the double digits. What's going to happen is relocking down alienated a lot of their voters, and although I do think most of them will continue to vote for them because again I think most people will vote for whatever side they're on no matter what happens, right? Most people will do that. I do think enough people will not vote for them to the point to where the NDP gets in. Because, I mean, the one thing too is that the NDP voters and the leftist voters are um, even more cultish than the right wing voters are. The right wing voters are cultish to some degree, but there's nothing more cultish than a lot of these left wing voters, especially the more further left people, and that it literally does not matter what happens. They will vote for their preferred side. Like it don't matter if what the leader could turn out to be a serial killer and they would still support them. Now again, they would make the same argument for the other side, which I think is true, but it's not true to the same extent, right? And again, there's several examples of that. I've made literal videos on that, but again, like I mean, you can take the if leftists actually cared about racism, blackface would have been enough to destroy Trudeau, right? But it wasn't. There's several. I mean, look at Biden, right? The guy sponsored the '94 crime bill, which is the biggest reason why blacks are in jail at a disproportionate rate, right? But apparently he got the most votes in history, right? So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, most people don't care, especially the leftists. So I do think the NDP wins the next election, and that will put the final nail in the coffin of Alberta. And like the federal conservatives, the UCP aren't really conservative. Again, like I don't care what semantics you want to argue over. Any politician who still supports the draconian restrictions is not a conservative, right? They're not a conservative, right? Jason Kenney complains endlessly, which I think is a good thing about again, if you want to argue that whether he really cares or not at the end of the day, I think you could definitely make that argument. But in what I'm referring to being like the Keystone Pipeline and the oil and gas industry as a whole, the lockdowns are doing more damage to Alberta than shutting down any of these pipelines and the carbon tax ever could. A lot of people would probably debate me on that, but I don't even think it's a fair comparison for the simple reason that the lockdowns are destroying the country as a whole, right? Like destroying the oil and gas industry at the end of the day, it really just mainly hurts Alberta. I mean, it hurts the rest of the country to a degree as well, but um, the lockdowns are hurting the country as a whole, right? Meaning there's going to be no help. Like there's going to be no help going forward. And the other thing people don't understand too is that Canada was on the brink of a recession going into this whole scenario. Calgary and Edmonton, I think both had like between 7 and 8% unemployment going into the virus situation. Like that's if that's not recession like numbers, that is knocking on recession like numbers door, like very close. So again, like this is the thing I brought up a million times, but yet no one really seems to understand is that Canada and Alberta, we're going to recover out of this whole situation if we ever do, right? If we ever do, into a recession, which is only going to force the government. I mean, it won't force them to, but they'll never admit they're wrong, so it will force them to just do more of what caused the problem in the first place. It's going to be bigger deficits. It's going to be more free stuff. It's going to be more regulations. All of what caused the problems that we're facing in the first place, it's going to be more of the same, right? It's going to be more of the same. And when you do more of the same, all you do is force the inevitable to happen faster, right? And I mean, to be quite honest with people, and I'm guessing most people would agree with me on this, is that if we're going down, right? If the plane's going down, we might as well do it sooner rather than later, right? Because the more we delay the inevitable, the harder the landing is going to be. So to be quite honest with people, I don't think that it's. I mean, it's going to suck during the time. Right? It's really going to suck. But having an NDP majority in Alberta and a federal liberal majority may not be the worst thing in the long run. Like again, I don't think it's going to be the best thing in the long run because I think we're going to vote left from now until eternity. Again, Canada's headed down the path of California. No matter what happens, we're going to keep voting left. Alberta's heading down that path as well. Again, people seem to think, especially outside Alberta, Alberta being this hick, the Texas of Canada. Which again, Texas isn't even very right wing. They're only, I mean, Ted Cruz barely won last time around. I think that the state didn't actually go Republican by that much, right? I mean, Houston's majority Democrat, El Paso's majority Democrat, Austin's vast majority Democrat, even Dallas is majority Democrat, right? So Texas isn't this far right state. Same goes for Alberta. We maybe be a little bit more right wing, but people don't seem to realize is that if the liberals are bringing in 400,000 immigrants every year, okay, well, 10-20% of those people are probably coming to Alberta, meaning if we're getting, I don't know, let's say, 20,000 of them, well, that's probably 15,000 left wing voters, right? So again, that's swaying the numbers. And the other thing, too, is that the more unemployed people we have, the more left wing voters you're going to get because the more people that are dependent upon free stuff, the more left wing voters you get. Right, which is the main reason why the left supports UBI. It's not because they care about the poor; it's because they want voters, right? They want voters. So if you're a right wing voter, then the biggest thing you should be concerned about is having the most amount of people in society that are makers versus takers, meaning the most amount of people in society that are producing more than they're consuming. Right? That in the lines are very simple. And if you look at people that are producing more than they're consuming, meaning they're paying more in taxes than they're taking out in benefits and services, those people are overwhelmingly right wing voters, and vice versa is true. The people that are taking out more than they're producing are overwhelmingly left wing voters. So when we have a damaged economy, when we have mass immigration, that's artificially inflating the people that are taking more out than they're putting in, which is just going to mean we're going to get more left wing voters. And the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get. So, as far as my predictions for Alberta, um, we may not go left next election. A lot of people talk about it like it's guaranteed. Again, I don't think it's guaranteed. I think it's more likely than not. Again, because at the end of the day, like I said, most people are vote for the same side no matter what happens. It doesn't matter if the UCP forced people out of work, destroyed their livelihoods. Most people are still going to vote for them, right? At least the ones that voted for them. And I won't. Like I won't. I voted for them in the veiled hope that they would actually make a difference, but which is clearly not the case. So I'll be voting for someone different or not voting. And I would suggest other people do the same. But um, like I said, it's only a matter of time until we get an NDP majority government. which means it's only a majority of time until we get more socialism, which means it's only a majority of time until we basically collapse, right? And the worst thing about it is that the leftists never admit they're wrong. Like California is, they have the biggest gap between the rich and the poor. They got the most taxes, the most regulations, the most homeless people, but yet do you hear any of the leftists in California admit, hey guys, we tried this whole high tax, high regulation, you know, we tried it, it didn't work. Do you hear any of those people saying that? No, you don't. Which is just them admitting it doesn't matter what happens, they're never going to admit they're wrong, which is why I'm so pessimistic going forward. In that I don't see any realistic scenario out of this situation. Like, I mean, there's Wexit. I think Wexit is not completely out of the question, but the problem with Wexit is that even if it did go through, the rest of Canada would do their damnedest to screw us over, right? So that's the other big problem with Wexit. And the other big problem too is that the mainstream media would pump out so much propaganda it's not even funny. Every person who supports Wexit is a racist and a white supremacist and a sexist and a homophobe. And again, like regardless of whether they're the exact opposite of that or not, doesn't matter how much, doesn't matter who they actually are, right? Um, but again, Alberta going forward, I think is there's no realistic scenario I see. Like, I mean, the two scenarios, at least from a political landscape, are the UCP, which are clearly complete sellouts, which are powerless to some degree, but at the end of the day, they're still sellouts. Like, look at how they've treated Barnes and I forget the other lady's name, but look at how they've treated them, like complete garbage. The only MLAs in my books that actually have some guts, they treat them like complete garbage. Look at how the NDP is treating these people like complete garbage, right? And this is the worst thing about politicians and just people in general these days is that people have such a lack of the ability to self-reflect. It's not even funny. Like, of all the things I've noticed about society ever since I've been out on my own, is people's lack of ability to self-reflect, whether it's political, whether it's personal, regardless of how you want to say it. That is the biggest thing that shocked me about society, because growing up, all the garbage you're taught in school, right? It always boggled my mind. Well, again, like, it, how can people be this, cold-hearted and this just bad, for lack of a better way of putting it. And again, when I get out on my own, it's like, oh yeah, everything all of a sudden makes sense, right? Everything all of a sudden makes sense. In that, people are pretty much the same as they were in high school, right? The same petty garbage still goes on. Um, the people, a lot of the people never really grow up. They physically grow up. Their age gets higher, but at the end of the day, their ability to self-reflect, their basic critical thinking skills, they haven't improved one bit, right? And again, by what I mean by self-reflect, at least in this scenario, is that people's ability to have a situation go down and think, could I have been wrong there? Could I have done something different? And again, like you take the virus scenario, like it just boggles my mind how people can support this still. Which again, if you want to debate whether they're right about, I don't care. But the point I'm trying to get at is how can people hold these such outlandish views, but yet never once think to themselves, could I be wrong on this? Could I have, how could I have handled that better? Right? And I mean, you take some examples of that. Um, Jason Kenney, yeah, guys, sorry for locking down the small businesses, but allowing the big corporations to stay open and rake in profits. We're sorry about that, guys. And then literally a week later, shut down most of these businesses again. They don't care. Like, again, like I don't understand why it's so hard for people to wrap their heads around. These people do not care about you. And if you want to argue they do, well, again, they live in such an echo chamber that they're gonna be so tone deaf that they're never gonna recognize the problems in the first place. So again, at the end of the day, the thing people need to understand is that 99% of these politicians do not care about you. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle they're on. It doesn't. The thing people, it's so hard for people to understand is that these people are very smooth talking. They understand. I mean, they understand a lot of the psychology around being, charming and charismatic, and the way to win people over, emotionally, right? Because again, most people are voting based off emotions, not off, reason, evidence, logic, all that stuff. So that's how they get it done, right? That the left manipulates people with being, oh, we care about the poor so much. We want to give the poor a bunch of free stuff, right? That's how the left does it, and the right does it in other ways as well. But um, so again, the one thing I brought up yesterday is, what can we do? Again, even though again I don't see it happening, I think it's once in a blue moon that less than a 1% chance we actually get out of this, but at least out of this unscathed, right? I think it is realistic to get out of this situation, but not unscathed, right? So what could Alberta do? I mean, number one would be Wexit, right? I think Wexit is by far the best option, to be quite honest with people, because that would free us of the sinking ship that is Canada. The problem with that is that's probably not going to happen. So, assuming we don't do Wexit, which is by far the best option, um, what can we do? Well, number one, again, end the lockdowns. Like seriously, ending the lockdowns would do more help than any amount of government stimulus, any government program. That would do by far the most. And what else Alberta needs to do too is number one, we need to double down on defending our oil and gas industry as well. That doesn't mean we can't diversify in some ways too, but again, the left, like they say, they only believe in diversifying when it benefits them politically, right? Um, Quebec is dependent upon equalization payments to keep their deficit down. It's very funny how no one ever talks about them having to diversify, right? So again, they're only interested in diversification when it's something that will benefit them politically, right? Um, so again, we need to do what we can do to defend our oil and gas industry, even though again I don't think we're going to get very far on that one. The other things we need to do as well is actually support free market, conservatism, right? Not this fake corporatism that they pretend is conservatism, right? Like this is the thing the left understands is that they think they conflate conservatism and corporatism as being one and of the same, right? And that they're very different. So actually be conservative. I think we can't raise taxes. If anything, we need to cut taxes. We need to cut spending too. That's another thing that, again, as much as the left likes to hate to hear it, is that Alberta spends more per capita, significantly more than the other major provinces, meaning that they don't hate the poor if they cut spending. No, they simply want to spend at a rate that's comparable to the other major provinces. Um, like I said, we need to deregulate, and we need to find a way to how can we differentiate ourselves? How can we innovate? Like what is something we can do to innovate, right? Because again, the rest of Canada is doing pretty much nothing, and not to mention too, we have to innovate and find a way to create jobs and create growth, right? Because that's something that Canada is really, or Canada and Alberta as a whole are really lacking on. Like when people think of Canada as far as work goes, well, they think of what, oil and gas. Like Canada needs to be thought of as a country that innovates in some way. Like what is it we can do to differentiate ourselves and to make create growth and create jobs? Like that's something that we got to do. How we do again, like I said, I don't have all the answers. I don't think anyone has all the answers, but I do think it's very easy to know where the step in the right direction is. And I think the clear step in the right direction is to actually be conservative, actually allow the free market to operate. Now, again, the problem with that is that we have the feds that are going to interfere with that. But again, at the very least, it's worth a shot. Um, and like I said, the biggest mistake the UCP made was alienating their voters, right? Like the minute that they re-locked down, I think that they lost the election, right? And that's the other thing too, is that then, like I brought up a lot too, that the people that are advising Kenny and the UCP, assuming they're listening to these advisors. They may not be listening. These are some of the dumbest people that have ever walked the earth, if you ask me. Like, at the very least, they must have told people, yeah, if you lock down, you're going to alienate a very large number of people. Maybe they said that. Maybe. Again, I kind of doubt it. But again, just one of the worst political moves I think I've seen in a long time, to be quite honest. And again, they're not save. People say, "Oh, it's worth it if we save some lives." We're not saving any lives. That's the biggest lie we've been told over the last year. Um, so yeah, in a nutshell, I think Alberta's too far gone as well. Again, as much as I hate to hear it, right? I'm obviously from there. I don't want it to happen, but again, we need to be realistic too. People are so blinded by the pessimist, optimist. You need to be a realist, right? And a realist looks at this situation and says, "Yeah, we're in for a lot of trouble." And the worst thing about it, like I brought up before too, is that the easiest way out of it the best way out of it in the long run is the thing that's going to be the most uncomfortable in the short run. And that's why our problems as a province and as a country as a whole are getting so out of control, is because the way to fix these problems, like I brought up before, in the long run is the opposite of how you would fix the problems in the short run. Because how you fix the problems in the short run is kick the can down the road, keep running massive deficits, keep having a big giant welfare state. How you fix it in the long run, knowing that if you keep doing that it's going to collapse, is slowly wean people off the drug, that being the welfare state and all the free stuff. That's the way to do it. But again, we're not going to do it. So we're going to be in for a world of hurt going forward. Um, so anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms. If you want to donate, you can do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get. But like I said, at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.